So in the last video, we introduced the concept of leptin, and that now allows us to get into the reason behind why we run into fat loss plateaus. Here is where I'm going to give props to Sujata because she came up with a very interesting question. Liposuction should actually work because you are reducing the size of the fuel tank. Allow me to explain. Let's assume that you have a 100-liter fat tank and you have about 95 liters filled in there. So your fuel gauge is showing close to full. Now you lose a certain amount of fat and bring it down to 70 liters. Obviously your fuel gauge is going to drop. But when you do liposuction, you're actually removing fat cells. What that means is you're actually reducing the size of the storage tank as well. And if you take a look at this should now again be showing full. Your body shouldn't have any problems because your fuel gauge is showing full and hence your metabolism doesn't get affected. But that's the point. You are trying to think from an intelligent perspective. The body doesn't have an idea of exactly how many fat cells are there. There may be millions, some of them very large, some small, some half full. So it has no idea of all of this. So the way evolution solved this is essentially connecting systems through signals or hormones. Each cell is supposed to generate a certain amount of leptin based on how much fat it has stored. And the body says, I'll go ahead and add all of these and this will be my reference point. So it has no idea of the size of the tank, it's the level of the hormone that it is responding to. Let's now put this in perspective. Let's consider a person who is 25 years old and weighs about 65 kilos, and this is the size of the tank, and this is the amount of leptin that his body is generating and regulating, and the energy is being regulated based on that. Now this person takes up a sedentary job, makes poor lifestyle and nutritional decisions, and puts on a certain amount of weight. The total amount of leptin being generated grows as well. So in a few days it would be perfectly possible to go ahead and lose all of this stored by maybe decreasing the amount you eat or maybe increasing your activity levels. But let's assume the person does not do this. Then what the body is essentially going to do is try and calibrate or recalibrate itself to the new level of this hormone. Cells in your body are always calibrating themselves to the signals they receive. A simple example would be if you are a regular coffee drinker and you think back to the first time you had coffee, you probably would have been like this for the next 8 to 10 hours where you barely could blink or sleep. But today you can probably have 4 to 5 cups of coffee and still not get the same amount of buzz. What has happened is that your adrenal system has regulated or calibrated itself to a higher level of caffeine that it needs just to feel normal. If you come back to this, what it means is your body is now regulating or calibrating itself to a higher level of leptin that it considers as its normal point. Let's fast forward a few more years. Our subject is now 35 years old and weighs 80 kilos. And this brings us to a lot of clients that I usually come across, which is, I'm 80 kilos, I used to be 65 10 years ago, and now no matter what I do, things don't budge. I may come down to 78, but I stay there and then I'm very quickly back to 80. The point is, his body has calibrated to that level and that is the new normal. The body does not remember that about 10 years ago it was running happily on a much smaller fuel tank and a smaller level of the hormone. This now allows us to touch the topic of fat loss plateaus. Let's assume you're 80 kilos and you want to get down to 65. You start a diet and exercise regimen and you start dropping, and maybe at about 72, 73 you run into this plateau. Now here is where people go in two wrong directions. The first is they start cutting down food even more and exercising even more, or a lot of them lose that enthusiasm, go off the entire regimen and are soon back to the 80. Here's the important point. You need to accept and embrace plateaus. This is your body simply saying, look, I want to survive and I want to try and hold on to the fuel that I was used to. So once you get to a plateau, try and make that your new set point. You need to come to a point where you can effortlessly maintain your weight at that plateau and your body is happy there. Now you reached a point where you can experiment with trying to reduce your calories further, or you start adding a little more exercise. The idea is you are slowly training your body to give up fuel without panicking, but you also need to have patience in the process. There are no shortcuts. Until next time. If you've enjoyed the way Truleen presents the science behind fat loss, health and fitness, please like, subscribe and do share these videos.